Thanks for spending your lunch hour with us. We thought first we would introduce ourselves, and since you can't see us, we might as well be Dr. Bunsen Honeydew and Beaker.
Yeah, Jen's the bald one. So Jen and I like to add this to our talks at the beginning because it kind of frames how we think about design and the kinds of things that we talk about whenever we are invited to conferences and even some of the books that we write. You know, a lot of our colleagues within the How universe are really dynamic and engaging speakers, and they do fun, creative brainstorming sessions and all sorts of stuff like that. And then Jen and I are kind of like the nerds of the conference.
When we were speaking at the How conference just this last summer in San Francisco, we likened ourselves to the broccoli of the How conference because it's stuff that you definitely need to eat to get strong, but it's not necessarily the chocolate on your plate. And so we're going to try and make this broccoli discussion as interesting and engaging as possible for you today because it really is something that we think you need to know about so that you can improve and grow your business.
There's puppets. It's fun already, right?
And there's Stuart Smalley, so it's
Right.
all good. So one of the things that we've noticed as practitioners and design creative spirits is that designers are always worried that something isn't good enough. And so you've been hearing a lot about design economies or changes due to lots of outsourcing and all sorts of terrible things. And so we've got some good news for you to start things out with.
So one of the things that we looked at when we started writing the book is, you know, can we put a finger on the pulse of the design economy? And what does that mean? And so we went through and collected a bunch of different data from a bunch of different sources to see, you know, where do we fit into a bigger picture? And so, you know, taking a look at a decade of AIGA A-Quant salary surveys, designers, the median income is $55,000. The economic the confidence index, which is also a part of the AIGA A-Quant salary survey, has been high for the past 14 economic quarters.
And again, we don't know how involved you are or how much you know about this, but you may have already been polled as someone for the AIGA Design Confidence Index. What they do is randomly send out to members and practitioners in the field questions about what it's like for them working in business right now. So the confidence index numbers are coming directly from practicing designers, especially firm owners.
And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, you know, they give us a outlook that, you know, our market sector is supposed to increase by 13% between now and 2020, which is about on average as the rest of the US economy.
These are some average salaries, and these are coming from BLS and ONET data, and ONET is another organization that's federally funded to gather this kind of information. So when we're looking at this stuff, we're pulling things right from the government.
So designer seems to be it's a very narrow term because there's all these other related professions that we're all engaged in. And so if we start looking at the median salaries of these related fields, things start to look a little bit better.
And so you may be in a different title zone than designer, and that's what some of those were. Comparatively, BLS data gives the median personal income for all U.S. occupations, so, you know, throw them all in together and average at 33.8. So you're doing much better than the average bear.
As a whole, right? And so, you know, this is good news, right? This is good news for the design economy. This is good news for you in general, but that doesn't necessarily mean that for you personally that things are going the way that you feel that they should. It could be your region, it could be your market, it could be, you know, the areas that you're practicing in. So, you know, there's some things that we want to talk about.
And with this conversation, we're not just talking about what your salary rate is. You may have had a number of conversations with clients lately where you feel like the design decisions that you're making are being marginalized by someone who doesn't have the visual expertise that you have. You may have lost jobs to outsourcing. There are all sorts of things that can happen that lead us to sort of struggles in our business life. And so the conversation that we're about to have for the next hour is beyond just salary numbers.
So design is something that is constantly changing, right? I mean, change is a constant. And so we are always having to reinvent ourselves as professionals and to adapt to those changes in those emerging markets and those new opportunities.
So we've got an exercise for you. And when you have time, I don't think you're going to be able to do it while we're talking today, but when you have time, we think that it's really beneficial as you're starting to forecast where you might be looking next. And this concept is to sit down and spend some time mapping your skills. And we'll go into it a little bit right now, but the book goes into a lot more depth on how to go about doing that.
Right. And so, as we're talking about this in terms of value, this is about the value that you create as a professional.
Your personal value.
And so traditionally, when we've looked at designers, we've thought about designers, we have these primary skill sets that help us create value and that we are technically proficient. We have these aesthetic abilities that are very specialized, and we have specialized production knowledge as well.
And these may be the areas when you were in design school that your education really focused on, right? You may have had production classes or software classes, depending on when you graduated. You may have focused a lot on learning about typography and the details of visual communication.
But it's also your day in, day out, bread and butter, right? That you are immersed in these things. That in terms of technical proficiency, you guys are super users, right? That your aesthetic abilities, going back to that 10,000 hours Malcolm Gladwell idea, you are constantly looking at the visuals of things and how do they work and how do they connect. And then, how do we fabricate these artifacts that, we're designing and developing? So this is where you spend most of your time.
However, when we were thinking about what designers really do, there's a whole set of secondary skills that we think really broadly apply to almost all of us. And so here's where we're challenging you to spend some time thinking about the other things that you bring to the game.